mental health, so we need this talk online.
Yes, we do. Woo! Okay, we're online. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Me too.
Let me just explain to you how we're going to do this. So obviously I'm going to introduce you, but we're going to take questions throughout the interview. We're not going to wait to take questions. So people out there, if you're already watching, we already have at least one person on. And I know that it takes a little time for people to come on. Please send me questions ASAP. We want to get the questions right now. So allow me to introduce Jacqueline, Dr. Jacqueline Gomez.
Yeah.
I remember when I first met you. I first met you reading of Menino 23 in Belford Roxo.
Yeah.
I think you took, and that's when I got to meet you and your students. And when I traveled to Belford Roxo, I heard a little bit about your history. I heard how you had broken barriers at every level of your career. So let me explain to everybody what you've done. So since 1997, Jacqueline Gomez de Jesus has been a human rights activist addressing stigma, discrimination, and violence towards the LGBTI community in Brazil. In 2016, she was selected for a tenure-track position at the Rio de Janeiro Federal Institute as a professor in psychology. And since then, she's also led a research group called ODARA, which from the Brazilian National Council for Scientific and Technological Development. And her research and teaching activities address how intersections of race, ethnicity, gender, and class impact the quality of racial, sexual, and gender minorities. She is also the first diversity manager of the University of Brasilia, where she coordinated affirmative action for Afro-Brazilian people. She also earned her PhD in social work and organizational psychology from the University of Brasilia in 2010. And she even completed a postdoctorate from FGV in Rio in 2014. In 2017, she was awarded the Chiquinha Gonzaga Medal by, at the time, City Councilor Marielle Franco. And this award is given by the Rio de Janeiro Municipality Chamber to women recognized as contributing to society. And then in 2018, she was even a candidate for the Rio de Janeiro State Deputy. Whew, that was a lot.
Some examples from my life, some examples.
I mean, Jacqueline, you have already lived 3 lives. We say
my goodness. A lot of things. Wow. Yes, when I think about it, it's really a lot of things. I try to firstly, good evening, everybody. And Keith of Kyra, it's wonderful to talk with you again after all this time. Although we are not physically near, we are near by this online ways. It's wonderful. I say we are not socially isolated. We are physically isolated, but our talks and lives and everything we're doing in this internet world is wonderful for letting people talk about all the stuff and we are living in, the world we live in, and all this thing about the coronavirus that is threatening the whole world, but mainly Brazil, because of all this social and political turmoil, we are living with the president and all this stuff. So I say my work is due to all those who were before me, who worked a lot. Also, my family, in a family of African descent from different parts of Brazil. I lived in the outskirts of Brasilia. So I've learned a lot, I lived a lot, and had to strive a lot. Yeah, I fought a lot for living, for being recognized, and for writing also, because sometimes you become a bit isolated about things. But we keep seeking for our truth and our hope for changing everything. That's why I try to do so many things.
Yes, you do a lot, Jacqueline. You do a lot. I'm impressed. Like I need Jacqueline has been doing a live video every single day for the last 2 months.
Oh,
my first question to you, Jacqueline, and I always ask about the family of Afro-Brazilians, so our audience, mainly Americans, can understand how far you've come. So you grew up in a city very close to Brasilia, not Brasilia, but Cinelândia, which is the much more diverse city right outside Brasilia. Can you tell us about your upbringing and your family life? Like, for example, did your family always consider itself class?
And so I will explain. It's like when you think about Washington, D.C., yeah, it's interesting because in Brazil, the federal district, it's an only municipality. So Brasilia, that's something we discuss even inside Brasilia. Brasilia is only one municipality. And like Ceilândia, where I grew up, it's periphery, it's of Brasilia, but it's inside the federal district. It's like being, it's interesting. And the district of Colombia, but it's not, it's same part as Washington, but it's different. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. And so I say I was born in Brasilia. I grew up in Ceilândia, as you told. It's like it's derived from the government of Brasilia, from the federal district. And many years ago, they tried to eradicate the slums, the poor communities, poor Black communities around the center of Brasilia. So they created a campaign for eradicating invasions. It's a campaign for eradication of invasions. And I'm trying to translate to make understand. The acronym was CEI. So that from there comes Ceilândia.
Okay.
So the people who were gathered together in Ceilândia is like more than 30 kilometers from the center of Brasilia. It's very far from the center, but they survived. My family came, my mother's side motherline came from Minas Gerais, and in the south end of Brazil, and my father's family came from Sergipe in the northeast. So they strived a lot as African people, Afro-Brazilian people. My mother was teacher, and my father worked as a computer analyst in the University of Brasilia. My mother taught in the center in a college school, in a college, like a college grade level in Brasilia. In Ceilândia, and so I was very close to books and to education. They all had a lot of value about education. My mother was the first person in the family to have a degree. Yeah.
Oh wow.
So yeah, in education.
Is your mother Black?
Yes. All my family was Black.
Oh, okay.
So that's interesting because she fought a lot. She used it to carry me in a bag to her lessons when I was very young. I was a baby, and so I was very close to university because also my father used it to York. He worked in the University of Brasilia. So I had the opportunity to be close to books, to read a lot. My mother gave lessons. She taught by day. And by night, she took care of the library of the school. Yeah. And so I could read a lot and always was close from the university. My grandmother Terezinha, my my mother's mother, she granny, she lived close to university also.
Wow.
That's interesting because in Brasilia, the University of Brasilia, it's in the center. The first campus is in the center of Brasilia, and it's a very rich region. Very few people from in Brazil. Those who live in the suburbs are very poor people in Brazil. Sometimes it's different from US.
Yes.
So very poor. We African descent people used to live in the periphery, in the suburbs, and so it's very far from the university. But when the Brasilia was being built, my grandfather, my mother's father, he was one of those workers who built Brasilia. He left before my grandmother from Minas Gerais. From it's a city called Santo Antônio do Itambé. And it's a city close to Diamantina, which was a city which produced a lot of diamonds in the colonial times of Brazil. Mostly many of the diamonds from Europe came from Diamantina, from the region my mother family came.
Wow.
But through the slave work was that our people was very exploited there.
Yes,
but they survived it. Yeah. Terrible. They used to try to hide some diamonds in the mouth, and there are a lot of stories. Yes, it was so different, the history of Brazil, but so close to things people lived around the world. Yeah, about this terrible thing that was the transatlantic traffic of people. So my grandfather, he built Brasilia, and he called the family, and he could take a place near the center of Brasilia to live. So they strived a lot. They don't have papers. You see, they had to resist that. They don't have papers, official papers that they could live there, but they stayed. And so they resisted until today. And so I was very close to the university, and that stimulated me a lot to search opportunities through education.
What is that typical? That's what is your experience typical for Afro-Brazilian?
It's not typical for Afro-Brazilians, especially in Brazil, and not even for the queer community, the queer people of color. And so I always say that it's important to see that most of us have no opportunity of active education in Brazil. Education in Brazil, it's always was seen by the government and by the state as a privilege, and a privilege for very few. And that affects us until now. Brazil just had universities in the 20th century. So we were very late, and just about now, very closely to the 21st century, the beginning of 21st century had affirmative actions for African descent people in Brazil. So it's like crazy. We was the last country in America to abolish slavery. We never had affirmative actions for the Afro-Brazilian people. We had to create the slums, the favelas, to survive in the cities, to be at least some way close to the places we live. And even though the government of Brazil, since in the 19th century, had affirmative actions for which population? For the white migrants from Europe, they gave land for them. But the black people, the African descent people, was prohibited to have land. It were prohibited in the 19th century. We have laws against, in some states of Brazil, laws prohibiting African descent people to study. to have the first letters, as they called it. So it was a great fight for resistance. We are still striving. That's really hard in Brazil. Even though we are the majority of the people here, we are more than 50% of the population of Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a lot of things. And Brasilia copies that. It's part of Brazil. Although it's very early city, we have only 60 years of the federal capital of Brazil, Brasilia.
So I'm going to interrupt you. I know, Jacqueline, I know you're a teacher, so you're used to talking.
Just stop there, talk all the time. That's right. Please stop.
We already have two questions, and I like to get the questions. Hopefully, I can get the questions from the audience throughout the interview. So our first question, and I know you can answer this question really easily. How has the murder of Marielle Franco affected the resolve of Black Brazilians and their involvement with politics and resistance to racism? See that? You see that?
I just have this plaque. It was made by the Institute Marielle Franco, which was recently founded by Aniele Franco, Marielle's sister, and Luiara, Aniele's daughter. And we are fighting for justice because what happens nowadays, Marielle is the best well-known Black Brazilian known outside Brazil. It's really astonishing. I can say that from having been in US. I had to talk with Marielle. I even think people know more about Marielle than for example, about Pelé.
Oh, actually, about, can you your earring out? Your earring is I can hear your earring playing with the microphone. Sorry.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Excuse me. So I remember people asking me about Marielle. Anywhere I went in the world, more than wanting to know more about her than about, like, for example, Pelé or Ronaldinho. And that shows how powerful is the force, the strength of her image, and also the villainy of her execution. Yes, she was executed because of her actions, but she was very taken as an M because she was a Black LGBTQ, a Black queer woman of the favelas, of Islam, of communities. So they murdered her more easily than anyone else because of racism, because of sexism, because of LGBTQ phobia. And we have to resist. And our resistance has provided seeds, as we call here. We have seeds of Marielle. And as Brian is asking, her murder helped us. Not her murder was something that traumatized us. That we were asked if we shouldn't hide ourselves. We were asked that. If we shouldn't strive for political positions, or we would be killed very directly. So our resistance and our fight for justice strengthened us to keep going and to help the seeds to grow. We have been an upgrade of African descent women in Brazil in the politics, the visibility of our talks, our thought, our fights. And that's so important because if we don't resist, if we had stepped back, if we had given up because of all the threats, they would have win. They would be winning already, although they are in the power. The murderers of Marielle are in the power. they were successful in their plan for establishing a state of political and religious fundamentalism in Brazil, a state of militarism, of a state of such neoliberal thought that poor people should die. They think that only people who have money should live. And they want, for example, to end our system of health, which is public.
Oops, did she? Oh man, oops, what happened?
She come right now in Brazil. It's bad.
Okay. Oh man, maybe I shouldn't do the banner. I was trying to do something really that. Hello? You back? Ah, she froze. Come back. Come back. Come back. Where you at? Where you at?
Yeah, it's time. Everybody's doing live, so it's
okay.
Wow! Worldwide, the lives are all time, so the connection falls. Everybody knows that. Oh, it's terrible.
Actually, we actually got another question from Aisha Lamara Tiwo. She asked, so as a bi-Black woman considering moving to Brazil, how safe would I be and how free could I be?
Hi, Aisha. Oh my goodness. I will be honest, okay? So first, as the terrible Trump president prohibited flights from Brazil to US, and he did that because, as I was saying, Brazil is nowadays at the center of the epidemic because of the president, because the president stimulates people to be in the streets. And so coronavirus arrived in Brazil in the worst moment possible, the worst social and political moment possible. And so taking that, I will take off the earrings or so you won't be tickling in the phone, in the ear. Yeah, so it's okay. So Aisha, that's a problem. We are living in a moment of extreme fundamentalism, social and political fundamentalism, with the growth of some LGBT-phobic churches. And for example, the mayor of Rio de Janeiro is nephew of the owner of the greatest church of Brazil, Universal Church, which is very against our rights, and most of their bishops, they are racist. They work with the idea that, for example, our religions from African descent are devilish. They say that, they teach that, and that's a problem. And for a Black woman, as my studies are shown, I found out in the research about mental health that that's something that we published now in the Global Public Health Journal. We found out that in Brazil, we have an extremely high biphobia level about bisexual people. I would tell that the levels of suicidability of bisexual people in Brazil is higher than in the other 5 countries we compare.
So even
higher than
which countries?
Higher than Kenya, El Salvador, Vietnam, Cambodia, and India. And so, well, yeah, I was astonished. I didn't expect that. I think that's because in Brazil, we have a strong social movement for sexual and gender minority rights. But it's a movement more focused on the homosexual people and more for gays and lesbians. And somehow I think there is a monosexual thought. It's my theory, a monosexual thought that if you are not heterosexual, if you are not homosexual, you are not seen as a viable person in Brazil. So I understand biphobia is extremely high here. And as the data we collected show, it's very dangerous for the mental health of bisexual people. So Aisha, please take care, darling. It's a historically racist country. We're striving for having at least more than 10% of Black people in the politics, in the parliament. So you see, like crazy, and we are more than 50% of the population. The ideology of racism, sexism, LGBTQ phobia is extremely strong in Brazil. So through education, we are trying to do that. Education in Brazil is a front line for this change. It's a front line. That's because they hate us. That's because Bolsonaro hates us, because we do something different.
That actually perfectly leads to my next question. Right now, you are involved with the LGBT and the Black movement. How did you first become politically and socially active? Which movement was it through? And how did you evolve?
Yeah, I was in 1996. I was in the University of Brasilia. I started my graduation, and I didn't have any involvement in social movements. I recognized myself as a queer Black person, but I didn't have any social movement involvement. My family grew up.
In 1996, you were 18 or 20?
I think I was 18.
Okay.
I was 18. Yeah, 13. I was 18, and I had no political involvement. But in 1996, next year, it was also, unfortunately, the year my mother died. She had a heart stroke. She died, and I was 19. And so I was very moved, and I wanted to do something about everything. And I started involving myself in the LGBTQ social movement. I didn't know there was a social movement there in Brazil. I'm talking from Rio. Now I live in Rio de Janeiro. But in Brazil, where I was born and grew up, I didn't know there was a social movement. There was an NGO called Estruturação. In English, it would be like structure action. Structure action. Estruturação. And so it is an old LGBTQ group. I started that and was immediately involved in the political actions, social actions, and very soon inside this movement, in 2000, I became president of the NGO, and I was negotiating with people in government for rights. I knew people from the Black movement, from the African descent movement in Brazil, historical people who strived a lot. I was close to, especially to Ivair Augusto Alves dos Santos, who was a kind of advisor for me. He was advisor for the human rights in the Secretary of Human Rights at that time, that now is the Ministry of Justice in Brazil. So Ivair showed me the Black movement. He even asked me to represent him in the meeting we had in São Paulo with Matilde Ribeiro, which was president of the Palmares Foundation. Palmares Foundation is the foundation in Brazil that takes care of our cultural inheritance as Black people. And now we have a terrible president that says that our Black heroes are not important. He honors a white princess. That's crazy, people in Brazil. So that's terrible. But in that time, we had Matilde Ribeiro, important Black woman who did a lot for our people. And so I participated and was involved in these discussions about affirmative actions. And sometime later, I was in the University of Brasilia. I was a student in graduation. I graduated and started my mastership, and also started working as a psychologist in the university. And I was involved in the movement of the Black students of the university. A movement called Ennegrecer, like It would be like you know ennegrecer.
Oh, I know the word. I know the word. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's like in English would be like becoming black, yeah?
Yes.
Yes, becoming black, ennegrecer. So I was there and we tried a lot. We achieved affirmative actions for black and brown people in the University of Brasilia, for African people of African descent.
And let's not forget, wasn't the University of Brasilia was the first federal university, to have?
Yeah, so we were the first university to decide by itself to have these affirmative actions, yes, because there was no law. It was an internal decision. Our Council of Teaching and Research decided to make that due to the askings of the social movement of the students, of workers for universities, said we had to have affirmative actions for Black people. So that was so important because it was the first federal university to have. We had in Rio de Janeiro, the State University of Rio de Janeiro, we call UERJ. UERJ had affirmative actions firstly, but it was a decision from the parliament of the state of Rio de Janeiro. And it was a state university. And so we decided by ourselves that we had, as a university, a historical debt with the African descent population. We had to do something. And that was so wonderful, was so excited, but also we had a lot of enemies, yeah, in the media, especially in the media, in politics, we had to resist. I presented a project for the dean at the time for managing the affirmative action system. So I was invited to manage the system. I designed a function and it was approved, and I was the first advisor of diversity and quotas system management. And I suggested the creation of a center for reinforcing the sense for Black people university to be a group, a collective. So it was approved also. And we was created the building of the Center for Black Convivence. We call Centro de Convivência Negra. It exists until now. I was the first manager, coordinator.
Now here's my question to you. And also I want to remind our audience, if you have questions, please post them in the comments. Why was the University of Brasilia able to become the first federal university? Why not USP? Well, USP's not federal, but why not UFJOTA, or why not UFBA? Why University of Brasilia? That seems kind of strange to me, no?
Yeah, I understand that we in Brasilia, as the new federal capital, we have a very visible social movement. And so the Black movements there, they were extremely smart and attentive to the opportunity to work with affirmative action. So it's so important, this doubt you bring, because at the same time, as I told, we were talking about the affirmative actions due to the World Conference Against Intolerance, Racial Intolerance in Durban, in South Africa. So many activists came from Durban, from South Africa, from the World Conference of United Nations. And they were convinced about this idea. Before Durban, I would tell you many Black activists weren't sure about affirmative action for Black people in Brazil. But after that, it was a strong movement, especially in education. We had in Rio and São Paulo important education movements. Like in Rio, we have the PVNC. It's a program for helping Black and poor people in education. It was directed by Alexandre do Nascimento in the Baixada Fluminense. Baixada is in the outskirts of Rio. It's where I teach, and Alexandre worked at that. We have Educafro from Sei Davi, He was an extremely important partner. Frei Davi used to go almost every day in the meetings in Brasilia, in the university. So the social movement was there, was pressing, was not a decision that was solely decided by the people inside the university, but also the movement outside university, the movement in the government, the social movement, the education movement were extremely important. They knew that Brasilia is a place to be visible around Brazil. So that's why I think we were the first to do that, because we had a very activist and present movement of Afghanistan people there, an historical movement.
Nice. Wow. Okay, so if you have any questions, don't forget to post them. So I moved to Brazil to become an international correspondent, but my first time reporting in Brazil was in 2014. And during the World Cup in Brazil, I actually came to report on the violence against transgender women in 2014. So I want to show you a little bit of the report that I completed. I did a video on this, and I'm going to show you, just show our audience maybe about
30 of course.
Oops, hold on.
It's in YouTube. Let's see.
Leads the list of reported transgender murders. This year, Mexico reported 31, Honduras 12, the United States and Venezuela each had 10. Trans people are murdered every day in every state in Brazil.
I know several trans who were murdered in the coast, in the country, in urban neighborhoods.
Whether they're in the street or at home, have already suffered from and experienced violence.
And I think I actually interviewed someone you work with. I went to Bahia and interviewed Luiz Motti.
Yes. Luiz Motti was president of the gay group of Bahia.
So that brings me to my next question. Why? Well, my next question is, okay, Brazil is #1 in terms of the violence against transgender women. Why is this? And let me stop the video. The video is still rolling in the background. I'll put the link in the comments. Why can you explain why there is a high level of violence against transgender women in Brazil? Even though we see a high level, like being in Brazil, I felt that transgender women have much more visibility in Brazil than in the United States. So why does this exist?
So it's very interesting and terrible because, well, I would like to first take homage for Marjorie Mackey, who appeared in the video. Marjorie Mackey was an important transgender women leader in Rio. She appeared and she died some years ago. She was responsible even for reinforcing the memory of a travesti, a transgender woman from the 16th century in Brazil, Chica Manicongo, which I made some research about her. Also, Kayla Simpson, who appeared, she is president from the National Association of Transgender Women, of Travestis and Transgender Women. And so why do we have so high rates of transphobic, extremely lethal transphobic violence in Brazil? First of all, I understand many of the data, it's a worldwide problem about the transgender people information, but we have very underestimated information about the overall conditions of transgender community. That's a problem, because as someone is murdered, like in the newspapers, it's shown sometimes not as a transgender person, not as a transgender woman, mainly the women are the aim of the violence. So that's the point. In another point, we have a very active visibility movement to show that. So we estimate the numbers better than other countries. We have in Brazil a, how could I say, it's a weird tradition, but it is completely understood in our culture, that the transgender women are seen as a sexual object, and they become part of the culture of Brazil, but not recognized. As I say, there were processes against transgender women in Brazil since the 16th century. We had the first visitation of Inquisition in Brazil in 1591 in Salvador, and they started a inquisition against Chicamani Congo, which was from Congo, an African transgender person. And in Congo, they had names for transgender people. They were called Kimbanda. So she was known as Kimbanda. So you see, we had red names in that time that the Eurocentric tradition didn't have. And so she was in this process, and she had to give up the way she used it to wear. She used it to wear like women and Kimbanda in Congo used it to dress. So she had to give up because she was seen as a man, and she had to do that or she would be executed by the Inquisition. But at the same time, the prostitution of transgender women was common, like in Portugal, in the places where it was normal to have transgender women having to offer sexual work for living because they had no opportunities. In this way, I think Brazil has high rates of violence, mainly against the transgender women who try to survive and live outside these stigmatized places. Like, if most of the transgender women in Brazil, more than 90%, just find jobs as prostitutes. So they are historically fought to exist at night, only at certain places like some brothels, but very poor brothels, and only doing things at night. They can live like going by the day in a bakery or buying bread or doing common things. So in Brazil also, we must understand we have a culture founded in the genocide. Yeah, the extermination of indigenous people. We are founded everywhere in the slavery of African descent people. Yeah, and we are very young democracy in terms of understanding democracy, because we were founded as a republic by a coup d'etat. Yeah, the state coup that we had, the military, they took the power from the empire, the Brazilian empire, and they didn't do any affirmative actions for the black population, and they were very authoritarian. We had a lot of tyranny and dictatorship in Brazil. So this idea that we must respect others' opinions, other existence in Brazil is not respected as something of democracy. And this point, I think, is really different from US. When you talk about democracy in US, the people in US understand very well it's a thing for the day by day. In Brazil, no, it's still thought as something for the politics. And so it's very useful, it's very common. It's very common to have these murders and to announce them sometimes as a prideful thing. It's not thought about. We never had in the legal system, except from the Inquisition, we never had any laws about imprisoning or law that decided to murder transgender women but they were murders. The policemen used murder to exploit. Many of the exploiters, the hookers of transgender women and travesty are policemen. They profit on the bodies of, especially on the transgender women of color. Yeah, because we are the majority in Brazil. So that's it. And I've seen that in terms of mental health, it affects a lot the levels of anxiety in Brazilian LGBTQ people in general, but especially transgender women. They have a high level of anxiety. So the
mental health.
What?
Can you speak on their mental health through your research?
Yeah. So it's that very high levels of anxiety, very high levels of suicidal ideation. And I think that we have internal good social support. It's higher than, for example, in Kenya. In Kenya, as the state of Kenya officially persecutes LGBTQ people, I've seen that the people, LGBTQ people in Kenya, which obviously in our, we Afro Americans, our perception of people of color is obviously different from them because they are in Africa. But it's interesting because, and sad because as the colonialism was so powerful that even in African communities, which historically had notions of sexual diversity and had the future, the homophobia, the transphobia is very prevalent, especially in the government. So in Kenya, for example, I've seen extremely high levels of depression and lesbian women that wanted to have children with anyone, especially white men, for being respected in the communities. Transgender women also that wanted to die. We asked for people around the country whether they would give up being who they are because of discrimination. In Brazil, mostly nobody said that. And
really?
Social movement, social movement in Brazil is important in this way, although we have high rates of murder. But in Kenya, almost everyone said they would change who they are because of the homophobia, because of transphobia, because of the sexist. So in Brazil, we have a lot of how could I say, backlash. We are living in an extremely dangerous political moment, and we have a very low scholarship. How could I say? Society very few close to schools. Yeah. Not formally educated. It's different from US. US, you have 98% of people are in schools. In public schools. But in Brazil, it's a recent strife we have. So we are still fighting for people to have formal education and a formal education which helps about sexual and gender rights, and not repeating the stereotypes that some women should be killed, some women should be raped. The president, Bolsonaro, for example, comes from this culture which some women should be raped. He said against the federal deputy, Maria do Rosario, some years ago, that she was so ugly, she wasn't worth to be raped. He wouldn't rape her. And he said that, I'm showing this example of Brazil, he said that he educated very well his sons, so his sons would never have relations with black women and gay men. And he also said, it's so many years he says that, and he was elected. And so it makes me astonished that people still don't believe in things he says. They elected him saying that. Yeah, he said he had a daughter, and the daughter was a moment he was weak, so he had a daughter. So that's culture in Brazil. The president says the thought of the medium of Brazilian sexist man who says things like that, but in the same time they used to hire transgender women for having sex, murder them, or are in the internet consuming pornography of transgender women. We have one, if not the highest rate of transgender women pornography consumption in Brazil. Really? And so deal with that, seeing transgender women sexual objects. Brazil is very known in Europe, especially in Italy, France, Spain, for exploiting transgender women for sex. So it's a terrible situation that we live here.
We actually have another question from Aisha, a great question. Aisha says, how can we foster more connections between Afro-Brazil and Black America, especially right now when our persecution seems to be growing under a global right agenda, Bolsonaro and Trump?
Yes, wow, Asha, really great question. That's the point. We have not a single answer. We must understand that you're saying. We have to build that, especially for helping us here in Brazil. I understand since Bolsonaro was elected that we are not powerful enough inside Brazil to take care of things on Bolsonaro if you don't have international help. Because of what? Not only because of his strength here, although he's weakening because due to his unfortunate and genocide, I would say genocidal decisions about coronavirus in Brazil, but because he's associated with Trump, yeah. So Trump reinforced him get elected.
If Trump had not been elected, we would not have Bolsonaro. I am so sure of this. So that's why we cannot vote for Trump again in November.
Yes, please help us. Don't do that, because if Trump keeps doing what he's doing, he is reinforcing this kind of thought here in Brazil and financing. Steve Bannon has helped the merchandising work here, the marketing work of Bolsonaro. The campaign of Bolsonaro was helped by the people who work in the campaign of Trump. And they are both together, even taking things that making Brazil worse, even in the economical ways. And in these ways that are worse for us, for Afro-Brazilian people. Yeah. If the way he works about privileging some populations, he's discussed against diversity, especially against the rights of women, LGBTQ people. I've known that Trump decided that transgender people would not be helped in the program of health system in US. So Bolsonaro always said that, and is working to end our public health system. The Ministry of Economy in Brazil, he came from the School of Chicago, from the neoliberals, so he defends that people should not have financial help, although they have to be home. But some people, many people, especially the Afro-Brazilian people, don't have homes, like they say. They live in slums, in favelas. They don't have water to clean the hands. They don't have water in house to use soap to clean the hands. Don't have food. So they need this time the help from the government. But the federal government don't want to help Black people, don't want to help the people who come from the suburbs, from the outskirts, especially LGBTQ people, because he really believes in this hygienic thought he has. He is driven by some fascist thought that those who survive the coronavirus are strong. So if the old people die, they were weak, they deserve to die. And that's so sad. And although we are striving here, we need to talk more. And I think this live we are doing is a way for us to be more together and to try to think and work things out, because we really need the international attention on this. If we keep these things up only to Brazil, we will not achieve people outside Brazil who may help us to show the dangers of Bolsonaro, not only to Brazil, but also to the world, even because of the COVID and the coronavirus and things he's doing on the health system.
Mm-hmm. We actually have another question. They're coming in. So our next question from the audience. Allow me, my computer is getting a little slow right now. How do you see the difference between gender studies in theory and transgender lives in practice, especially in Brazil?
Okay, Felipe. So, I would say there is some important difference between any and the real life threats in any field, not only for transgender people. Yeah, and that's a thing we work out in the academy, in the universities, in our research, so that the theory tries to understand the reality and not the opposite. Reality must submit to the theory. Yeah. So at least I've seen in our work, especially what we research about gender, tries to be more close to the transgender lives. It's recent, mostly because transgender researchers who are working for that in the university, trying to be in the universities, although we have a lot of transphobia in the academy, and although the gender studies still are so white-driven, most of the white feminists still don't see transgender people, not even black, as focus of studies. So that's a hard fight for us, intellectual fight, because we write a lot, we publish, and sometimes we are not read. Yes, we publishing law in not so known publishers, and it's still the white feminists, the white women who leads the gender studies groups, they don't endorse it. It's not as something curious. So in Brazil, we have this thing about stimulating people to read more, active people, read more to researchers, not reading only biographies, just to think they are understand the gender of transgender people reading biographies. It's important. But what are transgender people researching about the world, about the important? And also, in general, in Brazil, the social movement is very far from the university. And that's two-part way must be together to reinforce university and to reinforce community, and to must learn from community, seeing that university in general are the only way for our communities to face the Brazilian system, the Brazilian racist system. Only education may help us, help our communities to go through this barrier of the socio-economical stratification in Brazil. Yes, we are dealing with families which profit from our body since the colony. They are the owners of Brazil, yeah, and they finance the politicians who approve the laws, like more than 10 years to approve the law of racial equality, and they took off from the law of racial equality chapter on the importance of media for opportunities for black people. So that's it. We have to have more the people in the universities. We need affirmative action for transgender people. We need more transgender people, not as students, but also as teachers. Yeah, and also the rest. So if everybody don't go to and help and be together with the intellectual production of transgender people in general, so we won't change the situation.
Okay, cool. So my next question, wow, we have been on here for an hour. I could talk with you. I know I could do another hour, but and this conversation has been so interesting. Learning things that I was familiar with, but I didn't have the academic background with, and you're giving me that. So my next question is, oops, I want to talk about transfeminismo.
Yeah.
I am not familiar with this word. What does transfeminismo or transfeminism? And also, Jacqueline, your audio is going in and out. Do you have another headpiece? Can you?
My phone is it's out of battery, so I have to speak slowly and close to the phone.
Okay.
So what happens? Transfeminism, it's feminism. It's feminism, but feminism by the views and the hands and the bodies, especially from the women. Also, we have transgender men and transfeminism. But we must respect and honor the stories of the travestis, transgender women, and transfeminism. I say it's mostly like any other feminism. It's a way to see the world. It's a way to understand the relations and to fight for equality. For example, I was the author and organizer of this book. It's called Transfeminism, Theories and Practice. It's the second edition. It was the first book in Portuguese language. It was published here in Brazil, Portugal. It was the first book on transfeminism. And here we think about that, how feminism is for changing the world, changing this transphobic view of the world, and how transfeminism is adapted. It's like a hair. It's hair from the black feminists, because of what black feminists thought about intersectionality. We do that in transfeminism. What black feminists taught us about the intersection of oppressions. Yeah, we are very indebted for Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, Kimberly Crenshaw, Angela Davis. So transfeminism is interesting. It comes of black feminists on the view of women and feminists as white, but never saying that it was a white feminist, saying that there is other feminists, there are other women that are not being men, not being heard. And we hear these women, these other women. So I'm very about especially a black woman from the West, Sojourner Truth, that was not so very known in Brazil. I researched about her, and she now is very big. I biographed her and translated her discourse. And I was there in the last year writing the and we have published a book from the Nandiala Editora, a book called The Thought of and by Black Women. We are intellectual women talking about any other intellect. And I researched about Sojourner, and I talked about her. And here in this book, I wrote there in US, anti-woman in other discourses of Sojourner Truth. And I translated because I understand talk with that other people fought and lived in other time. And for example, the enslaved black women wasn't fought as women. They were fought as Sojourner is fighting to as woman when we have a transgender black women activist, actress like Laverne Cox. Laverne Cox, same question. The question that also in the black families in the 80s, Audre Lorde Hilbrink, Audre Lorde, and a woman, she would ask, and I'm a woman. And so we asking that. So that's trans feminists, to bring back 21st century questions that other women dealing with that. And weren't asking that. Black women are still not as so women or even not so white women. We striving for equality, so transparent about that. It's a way to change the glass. Everybody sees the world. Sometimes people don't know they use transphobic glasses. So that's the work of trans feminists, to warn that we have to change about so that we can change the world.
Okay, cool. So you guys, one last opportunity to ask any questions. I'm going to ask my last question to Jacqueline. So please post, if anybody has any more questions, please post them. My last question, please tell us about your experience running for political office in 2018. We understand, I know that you didn't win, but it seemed, I feel like you are you're a politician, because even though you didn't win, you are a politician. So tell us about your experience.
Hi, so Kira. Wow, I say political campaign is very tiring. It's tiring, yeah. It takes a lot of time of your soul, of your heart, of your mind. But I learned so much. I had the opportunity, the special opportunity to be with other black women, with other women in general, but especially the black women and the LGBT people in the because most of the time people think the politician as the white cisgender man, supposedly heterosexual. So this man is the one that want to vote. And we, the women in Brazil, we are not politicians. Yeah, although politics all the time. Yeah, black women are the most affected by the economical laws, are those with the most time have to deal with entrepreneurship, and they are in politics. We are in politics, but not in the parties politics, not in the parliament, because as I told, those who have money, those who have the capital, those who bought the Brazil a long time ago, they don't want there. They want to do laws that harm us. They want to approve laws for the rich people and guns to kill us. So it was very important. We made a lot of cultural change, but I could go everywhere here in Rio de Janeiro. I could know the city much more, be with people, talk with people, and we have to do a different kind of politics campaign, because people expect campaign expected the politician, the parliament person to be a man, and so have ways like in the culture of Brazil, which is very sexist, very racist and transphobic, what they expect of a man. So it seems that so we have a lot of fight and a lot of resistance. It was hard because even though I come from a left party, yes, I come from a party which is extremely attacked the last years. We have the party. It was many of the things that were devised for electing Bolsonaro. Yeah, and so I suffered a lot. I with Hatakat because not only being from the party, yeah, even from people from the left, other left of the parties, I was Hatakat to be in the Workers' Party. Hatakat, even people from the communities which profited under the politics of Lula. Yeah, I was happy because Workers' Party in Brazil took off 27 people from the misery. Out 40 it's like a whole
I think your audio is going out now. We can't hear you.
Do you hear me now?
Your audio.
Yeah.
It's kind of in and out, and then suddenly it went out. Like it was like, oh, I can't hear you now.
Yeah. Do you hear now?
Now I hear you. I almost think you have to talk really slow and it won't go out. Let's see.
Okay. So I will try to speak really slow. Okay.
That's good. Okay, that's good.
So I was telling that resume. I faced the media campaign and the political campaign against the Workers' Party. I faced some LGBT phobia. I faced some racism, some sexism, but it was the most marvelous thing to be together with other women who also live that, and that we are striving as of Marielle for changing all this set of things. So I was so glad when we had here in Rio, we had 3 women from the cabinet of Marielle being elected. We have Renata Souza, we have Monica Francisco. Yeah, we had this wonderful being elected, and in so many others like Benedita da Silva being elected here in Rio, have done Ribeiro also, and in São Paulo. Although I was not elected here in Rio, in São Paulo we had Erica Malunguinho as a transgender woman of color being elected. We had Erica Hilton elected in a collective mandate, yeah, and Beyoncé also in a collective mandate. So that's it. We are slowly changing things, but the moment inside the community in general, we must strengthen our lives. We must think about another economy. Yeah, a solidarity economy. I must improve the knowledge inside community about the history of LGBTQ people in Brazil. And we must improve also this political understanding, about the importance for us to have not only people who represent us in the parliament, in the executives, yeah, in place around Brazil, but also to have people like us, yeah, I say, to have this representation reinforced. We must help LGBT people inside the party to have a real investment on them, not only for the parties to say that they have women, black people, they have LGBTQ people, that they really help them. They really invest. They must invest. That they have some kind of important function inside the party. So that was my learning, and that to do now. I will not run for any political functions, but I want to work in the.
You want to run? No.
Yes, I'm.
You don't think you'll run?
Not this year. I think I must enforce other Black women, LGBTQ women candidates. Yeah, and possibly if these women, if these LGBTQ people, they cannot be elected this year in Brazil, but if they are strengthened, I think I advise my candidature in 2022 because I will know I have a strong background of LGBTQ people, more of transgender women, of women of color who will be making this change. So I'm thinking about this community in history, thought, action, and politics.
Woo! Wow, dang, that was a lot. I think we've been on here for an hour and 15 minutes, so I have to wrap it up. But before I wrap up, I just want to tell you guys about our, hold on. Oh, I'm still learning how to use this. About our upcoming chats on Thursday and tomorrow. Just give me 1 second. I'm open. Come on now. Sorry about this. I thought I had uploaded it, but I put it.
Kara, thanks so much for inviting.
Cool. Oh, wait, stay right there. So
my friend Marina, know her.
So tomorrow we actually have 2 people at the same time, and we're going to be having another chat where we talk about everything: Black feminism, how to get away with murder, Black women in media, and of course, even law. So please come tomorrow at the same time, 7 p.m. And then one more. Then on Thursday, we have Dr. Alini Andrade E. Silva. She's gonna break down the Black genocide, because I need, you guys need to understand that in English. So she's gonna break that down on Thursday. So please come every day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 p.m. And thank you so much, Jacqueline, for doing this wonderful talk and chat. Like, we learned so much. I learned so much. And of course, this video will be available on YouTube and Facebook. And Jacqueline, if you want the video, let me know and I can send you the video as well. So now we have a record of everything that we did in English, so people can learn all about you and your work in English. So that's the goal, to connect people.
So much.
Get over the barriers to connect. What?
You can send me by mail. I thank you so much. I really want a copy, but I know it will be the link will be available. And if anyone wants to follow me, I'm most also the time in Instagram. You can look at me and at Insta Jacqueline. It's my Instagram. Yeah, Creation is showing. Insta Jacqueline. Thank you. You wonderful.
Thank you. Bye.
The English listeners.
Bye.
Bye. Take care, everybody. And take Bolsonaro out of the power. And
yes.
Trump.
Yes.
Trump.
No Trump. No boss. Well.